I had a predatory relationship with a 56-year-old lady when I was in high school, and then she ended up dying of brain cancer. Let's get into it. This all started whenever I was in 8th grade. I got snitched on for vaping, but at the time I really wasn't. I was just talking about a guy who I was talking to at the time who was vaping. So me and my friend, because I knew I was going to get grounded, went to this area, which was like a tree that we would all meet up at in my neighborhood to do bad things, because we didn't want to get in trouble and we didn't want to get found. So we were just basically talking things over, and we met up with my third friend who's a guy. Then we were like, let's go into the woods, because we really didn't want to get found, and we were stressed out about it, especially me because I have bad anxiety. So we walk into the woods, but this is like right up against people's houses, right? And then we find this garden. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And it literally was weed. I thought like, this looks like weed, but I didn't at the time. So then we wrap it up and go back, and I get in trouble. Years later, I meet this lady. I met her because she had met a friend of mine, and like they were friends. So I was like, oh cool, an old lady who gives us weed and like hangs out with us, sick, let's hang out with her. So I would hang out with her, and she was obsessed with my dog at the time. My dog is a German Shepherd, and he was like purebred German Shepherd, really nice. Her dog was also a German Shepherd, but it was an American German Shepherd, and mine was a German Shepherd. There's a difference. So she was super obsessed with my dog, so we would hang out a lot, and I thought it was mostly just because she loved my dog so much. But it went on from there. Basically, I'm an artist, and I wasn't very good at the time, but she would give me carts so that I would paint for her. So I would make her a painting, and she would give me like 2 or 3 carts. And at the time, a cart is like $50. So that's like a lot for me. And I was like saving up money to buy them at the time. So I would do that because she had like a little power dynamic over me, right? And I found out that she was the one who was growing weed. She had this thing where she would like grow weed, and she was obsessed with it. But she just did not care about the law. Let's be so for real. She didn't. And her husband was always eyeballing me. I could tell that he was a predator and that he was like a creep, and he was making awkward eyes at the minors that she would bring around, because she was 56 and she was hanging out with minors, me and all my friends at the time. Yeah. So she would take us, we would smoke weed, she would drive us around to the dog park, and she was a terrible driver. I was terrified. She would hit curbs, and I would be like the whole time. But she would do that with us, and then she would drive us around on her ATV. And so there was like, her land was behind or next to a bunch of woods, so she would ride us around there. And there was a poacher who was trespassing on the land as well, and she was also trespassing on the land, but he had friends that were cops, so he would use that against her and manipulate her, and she was very upset by that. So she would manipulate him back or try to get him back, and then she was always having the cops called on us, always having issues, and we were always having to talk to cops, but she would always get herself out of it because she had all these issues, and she was clearly an old lady with problems. But she would also bring her dog around and bring him everywhere and say that he was a service dog and had fake documentation for it, even though he wasn't a service dog and she didn't have diabetes, but she lied about it, and they believed her because she was an old lady, and obviously they would. But then one day she tells me this story that she was friends with this other kid who was my age, and they were like best friends, but she doesn't know what happened to him. And I realized, it kind of clicked in my head. I was like, oh, this girl is kind of predatory because she just like only makes friends with kids, and the person probably just grew up and like aged out of the friendship with her. But it gets worse, right? There was a guy in my grade level who was like well known for sending dick pics to everyone, and like everyone basically had seen his dick at this point. So I like told her that, just like as like a little jokey mention thing, and she was like, oh, I'm gonna send him a picture and see if he sends one back. She sent him nudes and was waiting to see if he sent them back. Yeah. And then she fell off the ATV once, and she bruised her butt, so she pulled her pants down and showed me her butt, her bare butt in front of her. But she had this weird like thing where she thought that the cops were out to get her and her only, and she had all these problems with the cops specifically. And it was like, I couldn't tell if it was like psychosis or if it was real, basically. And I still don't know to this day, honestly, but I didn't know she had brain cancer at this time at all. Like, we didn't know she had brain cancer until I stopped being friends with her, and that's another story on its own. She was crazy when we stopped being friends. So after all of this, she brings my friend down to the ATVs with me and everyone, but there's only seats for 2 people, so they go off into the woods, because I've already been off into the woods, and it scared the shit out of me when she would take me back there, because I thought my life was in danger, which it low-key was after this story. So I'm just sitting there with my other friend, we're waiting around, and I see them walking back with my dog, just my friend, and she has blood running down her eye, running down her neck, and she's bruised, like, it looked like she was about to die. And I was like, oh my god, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And I realized I'm the only adult in this situation, because I was like 16 years old, but she was a child in the head, and my other friend was not as mature as me at the time, which is fair, like, we were children. It's not her job to be mature. So I tried to get her worked up and, like, fix her up, but I was like, okay, so my dad had cut his face open once, and I knew that butterfly bandages could help it come back together. So I was like, we need to get butterfly bandages, but I didn't know how to drive. And she was the only person that could drive except for the 56-year-old lady, and she had obviously a concussion. So I was like, you need to go get us butterfly bandages. But she's freaking out. She, not like freaking out because anything's going on, but she's just like, la la la, in la la land, like, not helpful at all in this situation. So I was like, okay, like, I don't know what to do. So eventually my friend who had the concussion ended up driving us around. Like, yeah, I know she shouldn't have, but I was too scared to drive. I'd never driven a car in my life, which I should have just sucked up and driven, but I had so much anxiety at that age. But yeah, she survived that, but the old lady tried to give us Klonopin to give to her to calm her down because it will help. And I was like, no, you don't really know what you're doing. But yeah, she had this weird thing too where she would have me, like, she was like, you're so good at finding things, you're just my little finder. And it was just like kind of giving grooming, you know what I mean? But anyways, after all of this happened, we had been friends for like over a year. I had slept over with her, like, I had made edibles at her house, all these things. She given me free weed constantly. Well, I was dating this guy at the time. He was black, for context, and he was going to pick up some wax for her. So he picked up the wax, and he was like, well, I can drop it off to her tomorrow, because he didn't want her to know where he lived. So that's fine, right? And I was like texting her about that, and she was like, no, like, you have my money, you stole from me, acting like we stole from her when we were going to give it to her in the morning. And she was like, let me just pick it up. I was like, he doesn't want you to know where he lives. Like, it was his mom's house. She was like, nah, freaking out, like, yelling. So she calls me, starts yelling about the situation, freaking out, and then starts calling him the N-word with the hard R. And I was like, oh my god. So I was scared for my life in this situation because she knew where I lived, and I shouldn't have told her where I lived, because he was low-key right about not telling her where he lived, because that was completely correct. Like, what? So I was freaked out, and I was like, okay, whatever. So I take the money out of my bank account, I send her the money back, and I'm like, it's over, it's fine. Like, you can just have the money back, we're not doing this anymore. And then I blocked her phone number, never spoke to her again, but she would always, after that, show up at my house repetitively because she wanted to see my dog. And then if my dog ran away, like, out through the fence, he would run to her house because he actually really liked her. So it was really complicated because I kept having to see her when I didn't want to after that. So I eventually just stopped going over there, and then my dog died. So I stopped having a reason to have to, thank God. I mean, not for my dog dying, but I really didn't want that to happen, but I am happy that I don't have a reason to see her anymore, right? And a few months before all this happened, she found out that she had brain cancer. She told me she had brain cancer. So I was like, oh no, like, I felt really bad for her, but she was also going crazy with it. Like, she was like, I'm gonna do all the drugs and try all the drugs before I die, because why not? And she wanted to do heroin, and she wanted to have her son do it with her. And I was like, you know, that's gonna, like, mess your son up for life, and you're not gonna be here anymore to deal with the consequences of it, and he will. I was just like, this is messed up, right? But I knew she had brain cancer. I knew that was why she was acting crazy beforehand. It, like, contextualized everything. Not everything, because you still shouldn't act like that, but, you know, it was just. So then, I'm living my life. I got into a new relationship. I'm staying far, far away from my house because I didn't want to come in contact with her at all. I would always drive by and be like, I hope I don't see her today. I hope I don't see her today. And then the friend that introduced me to her was like, oh, she died. Like, texted me that randomly, so. She's not on this earth anymore, but she has left her mark for sure with me, and I'm sure a bunch of other people, especially the people that she was talking about that she met before me, so. Rip Monique or whatever. This is my part 2. The story's all over the place because my life was all over the place at the time, but yeah. So when I say she got into trouble with the cops all the time, like, she would love to, we lived in a master plan community, like a nice neighborhood, and she loved to go up and trespass in all of the pools with her dog and let her dog swim in them at night, even though dogs weren't allowed in the pools at all. So she would go up there at like 2 in the morning and let her dog swim in the pools, and then she would give the cops a sob story every time. And she got away with it because cops have a thing, which she found out, that they love German Shepherds, and if you have a German Shepherd, you can get away with things with the cops more easily. So if there's a German Shepherd in your car, you'll be able to get out of the situation with the cops, especially if you're a 56-year-old white lady, though. Like, that's a little bit helpful. But her relationship with her husband was crazy because I couldn't tell, like, it was obvious that they basically just hated each other, and it was obvious that he was a predator because he would always stare at me very awkwardly, and he would make comments and just look like he was not a good person, if that makes sense. But she took advantage of it. She would use his money constantly, even though she had her own money, and she would basically walk him like a dog, literally. One day, I was at her house, I think it was either just me or me and another person, like me and my friend, and she sat there and explained to us his trauma while making fun of him and his trauma, and showing us a book that his dad wrote about his trauma, and like wrote a messed up ass book that was like rewriting his own trauma, and saying like his dad abused him, and he was saying that he was a terrible person and all this stuff. Like, it was awful, and she was just reading that out loud, making fun of it, laughing about it, like terrible, terrible, terrible stuff. But I didn't do anything about it. I would have stood up for him in a situation if he was my age and it was a normal situation, but it wasn't, because, like, yeah, you're getting bullied, but it's by your wife in your house, and you kind of chose for this to happen. I hate to say it, but I was 16 and you're not. But she was like a wacky kind of person, like, you know, the kind of person where they just say things and you don't really know what's going on in their head. Like, I could tell there was something going on there mentally, and it ended up being brain cancer, actually, but I would always write it off being a child because I was a teenager and she was always smoking weed. So I just thought she was wacky because of that, but no, it was more than that. Plus, she used to be an alcoholic. That was the thing. She was a former alcoholic and she was like replacing it with weed. So the reason that she had a weed, like that we found her weed farm, because you would assume that she would have that in her backyard that one time, is because behind her backyard she had emptied out the space, like cleared out the space of woods, and had stuff going on back there, and she was basically trespassing and making her own land back there, like, for fun. So she literally dug out a koi pond, had koi fish in a pond, and like a tarp, and then like chairs set up and a fire pit, and it was just a mess back there. Honestly, it kind of looked crazy. Mind you, she had the nerve to call other people white trash. I'm like, girl, shut up. Just because you have some money doesn't mean that you're not trashy with the way that you live. Like, you're just being classist. But the cops had a problem with that because one day she literally set her backyard on fire because she was burning the weeds away. She said that it was faster to burn them away, so she may as well burn them with a flamethrower. Literally, so she burned the edge of her yard with a flamethrower, and it didn't catch on fire, so she thought it was fine. Left, and then hours later there was a fire blazing in her backyard and firefighters putting it out. So they found all that stuff behind the house, but that was after she already took the weed down, luckily. So they got mad at her and like tried to issue her citations and have her take this stuff down, take everything down from behind her house. And she made a sob story up about how she was an environmental protectionist and all this stuff. She had the eco cops after her, and she somehow got away with it. Like, I don't understand how she did all this stuff, because it wasn't like there was clean stuff back. It was trash. It looked like trash back there. It was not environmental. And another time, she also almost burned her house down by catching her water heater on fire. So, like, her entire garage caught on fire, and there was, like, firefighters coming down the street. And I was friends with her at the time, so I was like, I wonder where the firefighters are going. And then I found out that her literal house is on fire. But yeah, she had a habit of catching things on fire, and she was low-key an arsonist. Like, I don't really remember, but I know for a fact that whenever people would do shit to her, she would like threaten to like burn their stuff down. So that's part of the reason I was so scared of her whenever things happened, because she was unhinged. She did not have fear for anything, and she didn't care, and she was also able to get away with things 99% of the time, which probably bred the feeling of unhinged in her. But that's why I was so scared of her, on top of the fact that she had a power dynamic over me being an adult, and the fact that all the stuff that she was doing with me my mom would have gotten me in trouble for doing at all. So I was lying about our relationship to my mother because I didn't want my mom to get us in trouble. Like, my mom did have concerns about it, but she would bring them to me and I would manipulate and lie about it to my mom so that my mom wouldn't feel concerned or worried, because I didn't want my mom to know all this, and also I wanted to be able to continue to smoke weed and get free weed from her. So, like, that's the dynamic that was going on. It was real messed up. But yeah, one day I made edibles at her house, and she basically just let me have as much weed as I want because she would grow herself, and she had a bunch because she would take all her husband's money and buy whatever she wanted constantly. Like, she bought me jewels, a jewel necklace, pods, anything I wanted, really. So she gave me all this weed I wanted, so I just poured it and made edibles. I literally cooked it for like an hour with some butter and then put it in peanut butter. I didn't even strain out the weed or anything because I wanted it to be effective. But I was so worried about making it effective at all that I made it way too effective because I didn't trust that edibles would work on me at all. Edibles had never hit me at all. So I made it so freaking strong. I put like an ounce of weed in there. And mind you, the serving size was 2 bagels. Like, the edible, like, that's all I made. Enough peanut butter for 2 bagels. So we each had a bagel. Her fucking dog ate, she didn't realize, and her dog ate half a bagel. So her dog was high that night. And then I'm sitting on her couch like, because I was really, really messed up. I didn't realize how much it would actually affect me. So I was messed up, and she had to take her damn dog to the vet. And I was like, I need to go home. My mom was freaking out. So I went home, and my mom comes into my room, and she's like, Taylor, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, that's literally how I sounded. Like, I thought I was talking normally, but the words were coming out slow and mumbled, and it did not sound normal. So I was like, oh my God. I knew I was fucked, because my mom had already been drug testing me weekly, and I was buying people's pee and scooping my sister's pee out of the toilet to pass the drug tests. So I knew, like, if she saw me actively messed up, then I was messed. So this lady grabs me by my ear out of the bed and pulls me into her room to take a drug test and tell me what was going on. And then she found storytime videos of me telling about how I did, substances in my extracurricular time on YouTube. And my videos were low-key a little bit successful. Not really, but they had like thousands of views. And then she was like, this is bad for your digital footprint, and made me delete it. And I was like, girl, be so for real. My digital footprint is already messed up. Like, really, really messed up. And that's why I'm a tattoo artist today. But yeah. If you were wondering where my mom was in this situation, I was already like a bad kid and doing things. And she was just trying her best. But honestly, it's really my fault. So don't blame her or anything. But yeah. That's my story.